Naomi Fletcher was crying in a maintenance closet when the new trainee knocked and offered her water. She apologized, repeatedly promised to work harder, and try to hide the bruises on her wrist. But what she didn't know was that Cameron Walker wasn't really a trainee. He was Caleb Wright, the billionaire CEO who built Wright Retail, and he had just gone undercover to investigate anonymous reports of corruption at his flagship store. And in that moment, watching a terrified janitor apologize for existing, Caleb realized his company had become something he never intended, a prison, and today he was going to find out exactly who turned it into one. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The boardroom fell silent when Caleb Wright announced he was taking a month off. 11 board members stared at him across the polished mahogany table, confusion written across their faces. In 15 years, the founder and CEO of Wright Retail Corporation had never taken more than 3 consecutive days away from the company. His billion-dollar empire, built from a single storefront in Baltimore to over 300 locations nationwide, was his entire life. A wellness retreat, Caleb repeated, keeping his voice steady and casual. My doctor insists. Stress management, digital detox, the whole package. Helen Winters, the chief operating officer, frowned. Caleb, we have the quarterly earnings call in 3 weeks. The expansion into the Midwest launches next month. This seems, which is exactly why I need to step back now, Caleb interrupted gently. You've all been telling me for years to take care of myself. Well, here I am, finally listening. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but it was necessary. What Caleb couldn't tell them, what he couldn't tell anyone, was that for the past 6 months, anonymous reports had been flooding his private email. Complaints about hostile work environments, unexplained resignations, employees disappearing from payroll without explanation. And every single report mentioned the same phrase: problem managers. Corporate had investigated twice. Both times they'd found nothing. Clean audits, satisfied employees, stellar performance metrics. But the reports kept coming, always from burner emails, always untraceable. The latest one had arrived 3 days ago, and it had been different from the others. It contained a single sentence: your flagship store is eating people alive. Caleb had built Wright Retail on a foundation of dignity and respect. Every employee handbook, every training program, every corporate value statement emphasized treating workers like family. If someone was turning his company into a nightmare, he needed to see it with his own eyes, not through corporate reports or sanitized audits. He needed to become invisible. 2 days later, Caleb Wright walked through the automatic doors of his original flagship store wearing ripped jeans, a faded Northwestern hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His expensive watch sat in a safe deposit box. His luxury sedan was parked 15 miles away. He carried a cheap backpack and a fake ID that listed him as Cameron Walker, temporary operations trainee. The store looked exactly as he remembered it. Bright fluorescent lights, wide aisles stocked with merchandise, cheerful music playing overhead. Customer service representatives smiled at shoppers. The checkout lanes moved efficiently. Corporate posters decorated the walls with messages about teamwork, integrity, and the Wright Retail family values. On the surface, everything was perfect. Caleb stood near the entrance for a moment, observing. A mother pushed a cart past him, her toddler reaching for candy displays. 2 teenage employees restocked shelves near the electronics section, chatting quietly. A security guard nodded at customers as they entered. But something felt wrong. It took Caleb several minutes to identify what bothered him. Then he noticed it: the way employees moved when a particular supervisor walked by. How conversations stopped mid-sentence. The way a young cashier's smile vanished the moment a certain manager's voice echoed from across the store. It was subtle, almost invisible, but once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Fear. Underneath all the bright lights and cheerful music, his employees were afraid. A woman in a Wright Retail vest approached him. Her name tag read Sharon. She was probably in her 50s, with tired eyes and a professional smile. You must be the new trainee. Cameron, right? Yes, ma'am. Caleb kept his voice neutral, slightly uncertain, the way a new hire might sound. "I'll show you around. We're happy to have you join the team." Sharon's words were warm, but her tone was flat, rehearsed. She'd said these exact sentences 1,000 times before. She walked him through receiving, returns, and the break room. Along the way, Caleb met other workers. There was Marcus, a 17-year-old cashier who couldn't hold eye contact for more than 2 seconds. He stammered through their introduction and kept glancing toward the manager's office. There was David, the stock clerk in his early 30s, who had dark circles under his eyes and moved with the exhaustion of someone working double shifts. And there was Patricia, a single mother handling returns, who smiled at customers but had hands that never stopped shaking. "Everyone here is great," Sharon said as they walked. "Management really values teamwork and efficiency." "How long have you worked here?" Caleb asked. 8 years. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You must really like it." Sharon's pause was barely noticeable. "It's a good company." That wasn't an answer, but Caleb didn't push. Instead, he asked, "What's management like?" Another pause, longer this time. "They have high standards. They expect excellence." Sharon's voice had gone even flatter. "You'll meet the store manager later. Brent Calloway. He runs a tight ship." The way she said "tight ship" made Caleb's stomach tighten. Before he could ask another question, Sharon gestured toward a hallway. "Let me show you the back storage area. That's where most of the real work happens." They moved through a set of double doors into the warehouse section of the store. Tall shelves lined with overstocked merchandise stretched toward the ceiling. Pallet jacks sat in corners. The fluorescent lights here were harsher, more industrial. The cheerful music from the sales floor didn't reach this far. Sharon was explaining the inventory system when Caleb heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Crying. It was quiet, muffled, coming from somewhere down the supply corridor near the maintenance area. The kind of crying someone does when they're trying desperately not to be heard. Sharon didn't seem to notice, still talking about rotation schedules and shipment procedures. But Caleb had stopped walking. "Excuse me," he said. "I'll catch up in a second." Sharon looked confused but nodded. "Break room is just ahead when you're ready." Caleb moved toward the sound. The supply corridor was narrow, lined with cleaning equipment and maintenance supplies. At the end stood a maintenance closet, its door slightly ajar. The crying came from inside. He approached carefully and knocked gently. "Hello, are you okay?" The crying stopped immediately. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the door opened slowly, revealing a woman in her late 20s or early 30s. She wore the standard Wright retail cleaning uniform, dark blue work pants, a matching shirt, and a yellow apron marked with the janitorial division logo. Latex gloves covered her hands. Her dark skin was beautiful despite the tears, and her natural hair was pulled back into a neat bun. Her eyes were red and swollen. She'd been crying for a while. "I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping her face with the back of her gloved hand. She forced a smile that looked painful. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm fine." A mop bucket sat beside her, the water inside still clean. She hadn't been working. She'd been hiding. "You don't look fine," Caleb said gently. The woman's smile faltered. "I'm just having a bad day. It's nothing." She took a shaky breath. "I should get back to work. I'm sorry for being slow. I promise I'll make up the time." The way she apologized, immediately, excessively, as if she expected punishment, set off alarm bells in Caleb's mind. "You don't need to apologize to me," he said. "I'm just a trainee. I am no obedi." Still, she grabbed the mop handle with trembling hands. "I shouldn't be back here. I have areas to clean." Caleb studied her face. This wasn't ordinary stress. This was something deeper, something trained. She spoke like someone who'd learned that showing weakness led to consequences. "Wait here for a second," he said. Before she could protest, Caleb walked quickly to the break room and grabbed a bottle of water from the community fridge. When he returned, the woman was still standing in the corridor, looking like she wanted to disappear into the walls. "Here." He held out the water. She stared at it for a moment, then took it with both hands. Her fingers shook slightly. "Thank you. You really didn't have to. Thank you so much." "That's very kind." Again, the excessive gratitude. As if a bottle of water was an extraordinary act of generosity rather than basic human decency. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. "Naomi." She twisted the cap off the bottle, but didn't drink. "Naomi Fletcher. I am Cameron. First day. Welcome." Naomi's smile was automatic, mechanical. "What department did they assign you to?" "Still figuring that out. They're showing me around." Caleb leaned against the wall, tried to appear casual and non-threatening. "How long have you worked here?" 6 months. "Do you like it?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said carefully, "It's a job." From somewhere down the hallway, a male voice called out, "Stock team, I need bodies on the floor. Now." The voice was loud, aggressive, authoritative. And the moment Naomi heard it, everything about her changed. Her shoulders pulled in, her spine straightened, her eyes dropped to the floor. The water bottle nearly slipped from her hands. The transformation was instant and terrifying. Caleb watched her carefully. "Naomi, I should go." Her voice had gone flat. "They need me on the floor." That guy sounded like he was talking to the stock team, not janitorial. "It doesn't matter." She set the water bottle down on a shelf and picked up her mop. "I need to be visible. I need to be working." The way she said visible sent a chill through Caleb. He'd spent 15 years building a company culture where employees felt valued and safe. This woman was neither. "Did someone do something to you?" he asked quietly. Naomi froze. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and Caleb saw raw fear in her eyes. She started to answer. Her lips parted, her breath caught, but then she stopped herself mid-thought. She glanced toward the hallway where the voice had come from. "I shouldn't talk," she whispered. "Please don't ask me questions." "Naomi, I have to go." She pushed past him with a mop bucket, moving quickly down the corridor. "Welcome to Right Retail, Cameron. I hope your first day goes well." She disappeared around the corner before Caleb could say anything else. He stood alone in the empty corridor, staring at the maintenance closet where he'd found her crying. The abandoned water bottle sat on the shelf, still unopened. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Something was very wrong in his store, and whatever it was, it had reduced a grown woman to tears and terror in a storage closet, too afraid to even speak about it. Caleb looked back one more time toward where Naomi had disappeared. Through the doorway to the main floor, he could just barely see her, standing near the cleaning supplies cart, wiping her face again before pulling her gloves back on. Her shoulders were squared. Her expression was blank. She looked like a soldier preparing for battle. In that moment, Caleb made a decision. He hadn't come here to inspect sales figures or evaluate inventory systems. He'd come here to find the truth. And the truth was standing in front of him, too afraid to speak. He was going to find out what was happening to Naomi Fletcher. And when he did, someone was going to pay for it. The next morning, Caleb arrived for his second day and immediately sensed a shift in the store's atmosphere. The workers seemed more tense, more careful. And within 15 minutes, he understood why. Brent Calloway had arrived. The store manager was exactly the kind of person Caleb had learned to distrust over the years. Loud, performatively friendly, and radiating authority like a weapon. He was in his mid-40s, with slick-back hair, an expensive watch, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He moved through the store like he owned it, and everyone scattered before him like birds fleeing a predator. "Cameron Walker." Brent's voice boomed across the sales floor. "Our new trainee. Welcome to the family." He strode over with his hand extended. His handshake was too firm, his eye contact too intense. Everything about him screamed dominance. "Thank you, sir," Caleb said, playing the role of uncertain new hire. "Please call me Brent. We're all family here at Right Retail." He clapped Caleb on the shoulder hard enough to sting. "I like to personally welcome every new team member. Let me show you around. I want you to see how we do things here." Sharon already gave me a tour yesterday. Sharon did basic orientation. Brent interrupted smoothly. "I'm going to show you what excellence looks like." There was no room to refuse. Brent's hand remained on Caleb's shoulder as he guided him through the store, narrating everything with practiced enthusiasm. He praised the company values, talked about discipline and structure, and made everything sound positive while his employees tensed and fell silent whenever he approached. It was masterful manipulation. The words were corporate approved, but the subtext was control. Caleb watched carefully. When Brent walked past the electronics section, Marcus, the teenage cashier, immediately straightened and grabbed a display cloth, pretending to clean spotless screens. When Brent approached the stockroom, David moved faster, his movements becoming almost frantic. And when they passed through the cleaning supplies area, Naomi was there, wiping down the same counter she'd already cleaned, her movements mechanical and repetitive. "Efficiency is everything," Brent said, gesturing around. "Everyone has a role. Everyone contributes. That's what makes this store the best-performing location in the region." "It seems very organized," Caleb offered. "Organized?" Brent laughed. "My friend, we're a well-oiled machine. You see that woman there?" He pointed at Naomi. "She understands the importance of thoroughness. Some people need more guidance than others, but everyone learns eventually." The way he said guidance made Caleb's jaw clench. He forced himself to stay neutral. They continued the tour, with Brent pointing out various achievements and metrics. Everything felt rehearsed, staged. The workers snapped into position when Brent approached, smiled when he looked at them, and relaxed only after he'd moved on. It was like watching a theater production where everyone knew their lines, but nobody wanted to be there. As they walked past the returns desk, Marcus, the teenage cashier, suddenly appeared at Caleb's side. He was carrying a stack of receipt paper, restocking the register supplies. When Brent turned to point out something on the far wall, Marcus quickly slipped something into Caleb's hand. A receipt with writing on the back. Caleb palmed it smoothly, keeping his expression neutral. Marcus walked away without a word, his hands shaking slightly. Brent finished his monologue and checked his expensive watch. "I have a conference call with regional management. But remember, Cameron, my door is always open. We take care of our people here." "I appreciate that." "Good man." Brent gave him another shoulder clap and walked away toward the management offices. The moment he disappeared, the store seemed to exhale. Conversations resumed. Workers moved with slightly less tension. The invisible weight lifted just enough to breathe. Caleb waited until he was alone near the restroom corridor, then unfolded the receipt Marcus had given him. The handwriting was rushed, barely legible. "Don't ask questions." "Not here." Caleb stared at the words for a long moment, then carefully folded the receipt and tucked it into his pocket. A 17-year-old kid was scared enough to risk passing notes to a stranger. That said everything. He spent the rest of the afternoon working where they assigned him, helping with inventory checks, learning the stock system, and observing. He watched Brent interact with other employees. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Public friendliness masking private intimidation. Praise that felt like a threat. Questions that felt like tests. Around 3 in the afternoon, Caleb needed to use the restroom. He headed toward the employee facilities near the back of the store, pushing through the door marked staff only. He stopped immediately. Naomi was sitting on the floor near the sinks, her back against the wall, breathing in short, sharp gasps. Her cleaning gloves lay discarded beside her. She was trying to steady herself, one hand pressed against her chest, her eyes squeezed shut. She didn't hear him enter. The panic attack, because that's clearly what it was, had her completely in its grip. Caleb knelt down a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. "Naomi!" Her eyes snapped open. She saw him and immediately tried to stand, scrambling to her feet. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I needed a minute. I'm going back to work right now." "Stop apologizing." Caleb stayed where he was, keeping his voice calm. "Just breathe. You're okay. I'm fine." But her hands were shaking violently, and tears were streaming down her face. "I just needed a second. I'm fine." She reached for her gloves, and that's when Caleb saw them. Faint bruises on her left wrist, finger-shaped marks that disappeared under her sleeve. She noticed him looking and quickly pulled her uniform sleeve down, turning away. "Who did that to you?" Caleb asked. "Nobody. I am clumsy." "Naomi, please stop asking me questions." Her voice broke. "Please. You seem nice, Cameron, but you don't understand. You can't ask questions here. Not about management. Not about anything." Caleb stood slowly, keeping his distance. "What happens if someone asks questions?" Naomi laughed, but was a bitter, hollow sound. This store isn't like the others. People who complain don't stay. Some leave. Some get fired. Some just disappear from the schedule, and everyone's told they quit. She wiped her face roughly. But they didn't quit. They were pushed out. Have you tried reporting this? Her laugh turned even darker. To who? Corporate? The same corporate that sent me here after I reported harassment at my last store? This was supposed to be my fresh start. She met his eyes, and Caleb saw exhaustion there. The kind that comes from fighting a battle you know you can't win. I need this job. I have to keep this job. Do you understand? What happens if you lose it? Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. My little brother. Marcus, he's 16. Our mom died 8 months ago. It's just me and him now. If I miss even one paycheck, we lose the apartment. He gets pulled out of school. He goes into the system. She shook her head. I can't let that happen. So I stay quiet. I do whatever they want. And I survive. The weight of it hit Caleb like a physical blow. This wasn't just workplace abuse. This was systematic entrapment. They'd found employees who couldn't afford to leave, who were vulnerable and desperate, and they'd made them prisoners of necessity. I'm so sorry, he said quietly. It's not your fault. Naomi bent down to pick up her gloves. Welcome to Right Retail, Cameron. If you're smart, you'll find another job. She started toward the door, then paused. And if anyone asks, you didn't see me here. Please. She left before Caleb could respond. He stood alone in the restroom, rage building in his chest. This was his company. His name was on every building, every paycheck, every corporate mission statement. And someone was using it to torture people. The afternoon shift continued. Caleb worked where they assigned him, but his attention stayed on Naomi. She moved through her tasks mechanically, cleaning areas that were already spotless, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Then, around 5 o'clock, everything exploded. Caleb was restocking shelves near the main aisle when he heard Brent's voice boom across the sales floor. Naomi, front and center. Customers turned to look. Employees froze. And Naomi walked slowly toward where Brent stood near the checkout lanes, her head down. Yes, sir. Her voice was barely audible. I've been watching you all day. Brent's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Walking around. Wandering. I haven't seen you actually clean anything in the last hour. I cleaned the break room, the restrooms, the stock area. Are you arguing with me? Naomi's shoulders hunched. No, sir. Then stop making excuses. Brent pointed at a spot near the entrance. There's a spill by the door. Clean it. Now. Caleb followed Naomi's gaze. There was no spill. The floor was spotless. But Naomi said nothing. She walked to her cleaning cart, retrieved the mop, and began cleaning the non-existent spill while customers watched. Brent stood nearby with his arms crossed, making sure everyone saw. Thoroughly, he added. I want it spotless. Yes, sir. Naomi's voice shook. I'm sorry, sir. See that, everyone? Brent addressed the store like it was a classroom. This is what happens when standards slip. We fix it immediately. That's excellence. Caleb's hands clenched around the box he was holding. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, to walk over there and tell Brent exactly who he was and what was about to happen to his career. But he couldn't. Not yet. If he revealed himself now, Naomi and everyone else would be silenced before he could help them. The conspiracy would scatter. Evidence would disappear. So he stood there, watching, and swallowed his rage. Naomi cleaned the spotless floor for 10 minutes before Brent finally waved her away. She returned her mop to the cart and disappeared into the back area. Customers resumed shopping. The moment passed. But Caleb would never forget the look on Naomi's face. The blank, defeated expression of someone who'd learned that resistance was pointless. As his shift ended and he headed toward the employee exit, Caleb passed by the management office area. Through a partially open door, he glimpsed 2 figures inside a room marked Inventory Control. Authorized personnel only. One was Brent Calloway. The other was a woman Caleb hadn't met yet. Sharp suit, blonde hair, corporate badge. He slowed his pace, pretending to check his phone, and caught fragments of their conversation. Regional compliance next week. Clean files, clean reports. Problem employees need to be handled before audit. The door closed before he could hear more. Caleb filed the information away and continued to the exit. But as he passed the janitorial supply closet, he noticed something: the trash bin outside the management offices. Naomi must have emptied it recently, because a cleaning cart sat nearby. Sticking out of the trash at a slight angle was a piece of paper. It had been torn but not completely destroyed. Caleb glanced around, then quickly retrieved it. It was a Wright Retail Corporation disciplinary report form. The header was authentic, corporate logo, case number, official formatting. But something about it felt wrong. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be from the regional HR director. Caleb had seen that signature 1,000 times. He'd hired the man himself. This wasn't his signature. It was close, but it was forged. Someone inside his company was creating fake disciplinary documents, manufacturing paper trails, building false records that could be used to justify firings, demotions, or worse. Caleb carefully folded the document and slipped it into his pocket. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just a bad manager. This wasn't just workplace harassment. This was systematic fraud, orchestrated and hidden, using his company's own infrastructure against its most vulnerable workers. And Naomi was trapped in the middle of it. As Caleb walked to his car in the employee parking lot, he thought about the crying woman in the maintenance closet, the bruises on her wrist, the way she apologized for existing, the fear that controlled every word she spoke. He'd built Wright Retail to be different, to be better, to treat people with dignity. Someone had turned it into a prison. Caleb sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the store's bright facade. Behind that cheerful exterior, people were suffering. And tomorrow, he would go back inside and dig deeper. Because now he knew the truth. The store wasn't just broken. It was a crime scene. And Naomi Fletcher was the witness, too scared to testify. He started the engine and drove away, already planning his next move. The forged document sat in his glove compartment, the first piece of evidence in what he suspected would become a much larger case. Tomorrow, he would find out what was happening in that locked inventory room. He would discover who the woman in the corporate suit was, and he would figure out exactly how deep this conspiracy reached. But tonight, as he drove through the city streets, one image stayed with him. Naomi standing in that narrow corridor, wiping her tears before putting her glove back on, preparing to survive another day. She'd asked him to stop asking questions. But Caleb Wright had never been good at staying quiet in the face of injustice. And he wasn't about to start now. The forged disciplinary report sat on the passenger seat of Caleb's car as he drove to a secure location across town. He'd spent the previous night in a motel room, photographing the document from every angle under proper lighting, capturing the fake signature, the authentic corporate letterhead, and the fabricated violation details. Each image was uploaded to an encrypted cloud server that only he and his personal attorney could access. Now, in the early morning darkness before his third day at the store, Caleb sat in that same car and stared at the photos on his phone. The implications were staggering. Someone had access to official Wright Retail documentation. Someone knew the formatting, the protocols, the signature styles well enough to create convincing forgeries. This wasn't the work of a rogue store manager. This required corporate-level access. He wanted to call his legal team immediately. He wanted to activate every resource at his disposal and burn this operation to the ground. But every instinct told him that moving too quickly would be a mistake. If he revealed himself now, the conspirators would scatter. Evidence would be destroyed. And Naomi, along with who knew how many other employees, would be silenced before they could tell their stories. He needed more. He needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before he struck. Caleb pocketed his phone and headed into the store for another day of invisible observation. The morning started quietly. Brent hadn't arrived yet, and the atmosphere felt marginally less oppressive. Caleb worked alongside David in the stockroom, helping process a delivery shipment. The older man was friendly enough, but guarded, answering questions with short, careful responses that revealed nothing. "You settling in okay?" David asked as they broke down cardboard boxes. "I think so. Still learning the ropes. Best advice I can give you." David lowered his voice, glancing toward the stockroom door. "Keep your head down. Do your work. Don't make waves. That's how you survived 8 years here." David's hands paused on the box cutter. Who told you I've been here 8 years? Sharon mentioned it yesterday. Sorry was that. No, it's fine. David resumed cutting. Yeah, 8 years. Used to be different, though. Management changed about 2 years ago. Things got stricter. Stricter how? David shot him a look that said the conversation was over. Just keep your head down, Cameron. Trust me. Before Caleb could press further, they heard voices approaching, Brent's loud greeting to someone, followed by a woman's crisp, professional tone. Caleb moved closer to the stockroom entrance, positioning himself where he could see without being obvious. Brent walked past with a blonde woman Caleb had glimpsed the previous day. In daylight, she looked even more corporate, tailored navy suit, designer heels, expensive leather briefcase. Her badge identified her as Lydia Cross, Regional Compliance Officer. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who wielded significant authority. The inventory reconciliation is scheduled for Friday, Lydia was saying. I need all documentation prepared and any discrepancies resolved before the auditors arrive. Everything's clean, Brent assured her. Numbers are tight. Files are organized. We won't have any issues. Good. The last thing we need is regional scrutiny. Corporate is already asking too many questions. They disappeared into the management corridor, their voices fading. David had gone pale. Compliance audit, he muttered. That's never good. Why not? If everything's clean. Nothing's ever really clean, Cameron. You'll learn. David grabbed another box and turned away, clearly done talking. Caleb filed the information away. A compliance officer stationed at a single store was unusual. Regional compliance typically rotated between locations, conducting spot checks rather than maintaining permanent presence. Unless there was a specific reason to keep someone here. Unless something needed constant monitoring and control. Around mid-morning, Caleb finally found Naomi. She was cleaning the employee break room, moving slowly, mechanically. Her eyes were red again, and she kept them fixed on the floor. Morning, Caleb said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She glanced up briefly. Morning, Cameron. You okay? I'm Fina. The automatic response, hollow and unconvincing. Caleb moved closer, keeping his voice low. Listen, I know you told me not to ask questions, but I found something yesterday. Something that suggests what's happening here is bigger than just a bad manager. Naomi's hands tightened on the cleaning spray bottle. Please don't. A forged document. Official right retail paperwork with a fake signature. Someone's creating false disciplinary records. She went very still. How do you know it's fake? The signature doesn't match. I've seen enough company documents to know. The lie came easily, close enough to truth to be believable. Naomi set down the spray bottle carefully, her hands shaking. She looked toward the break room door, then back at him. If you're smart, you'll forget you saw that. Forget we had this conversation. I can't do that. Then you're going to get hurt. Her voice cracked. Or worse. Naomi, what happened to you at your last store? You said you reported harassment. I reported my supervisor for inappropriate touching. The words came out flat, rehearsed. Corporate investigated. They said there wasn't enough evidence. They offered me a transfer to this store as a fresh start. Told me I'd be safe here. She laughed bitterly. 3 weeks after I arrived, the harassment started again. Different people, same pattern. When I asked to speak with HR, Brent told me I already had my second chance. If I complained again, I'd be marked as a problem employee. That's illegal. It's also impossible to prove. Naomi picked up the spray bottle again. They're careful, Cameron. Everything happens behind closed doors. Every threat is verbal. Every violation is deniable. And if you try to fight back, suddenly your time card shows violations you never committed. Or merchandise goes missing from areas you were responsible for. Or customer complaints appear with your name on them. Caleb felt rage building in his chest. Have they done that to you? Not yet, but I've seen it happen to others. She paused. There was a guy who worked stock. Jerome Williams. Nice man, mid-30s, had a family. He started asking why his overtime wasn't showing up on his paycheck. Started questioning the numbers. 2 weeks later, security found stolen electronics in his locker. He was arrested, fired, and banned from the premises. Naomi's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I saw Brent plant those items the night before. I was cleaning nearby. He didn't know I was there. You witnessed a crime. I witnessed my future if I ever speak up. She met his eyes directly for the first time. That's how this works. They find your weakness. Mine is my brother, Marcus, and they use it to control you. You stay quiet. You keep your job. You speak up. You lose everything. Before Caleb could respond, footsteps approached. Naomi immediately busied herself wiping down an already clean counter. Lydia Cross appeared in the doorway, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Naomi, correct? Her voice was pleasant but cold. Yes, ma'am. I'll need the management offices cleaned this afternoon. Make sure you're thorough. Mr. Calloway is very particular about his workspace. Of course, ma'am. Lydia's gaze shifted to Caleb. And you're the new trainee, Cameron Walker. Yes, ma'am. How are you finding things so far? Good. Everyone's been very helpful. Excellent. Lydia's smile didn't reach her eyes. We pride ourselves on our training program. Though I hope you understand that some employees, she glanced at Naomi, require more supervision than others. It's important not to let their attitudes influence your own work ethic. The implication was clear. Naomi was being labeled as a problem, and Caleb was being warned not to associate with her. I'll keep that in mind, Caleb said neutrally. Good. Lydia turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Naomi? I noticed your attendance record shows you left early last Thursday. Care to explain? Naomi's face went pale. I didn't leave early, ma'am. I worked my full shift. That's not what the system shows. Perhaps you forgot to clock out properly? Lydia's tone suggested this wasn't a question. I'll let it slide this time, but do be more careful. We can't have time card irregularities. She left before Naomi could defend herself. The moment she was gone, Naomi's composure shattered. She gripped the edge of the counter, breathing hard. I didn't leave early. I worked until 8 that night. I remember because I had to catch the late bus. They're manipulating the records, Caleb said. I know. Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. This is how it starts. First, they create false violations. Then they build a paper trail. Then they fire you for cause, so you can't collect unemployment. And if you try to fight it, they have documentation proving you were a problem employee. She wiped her face roughly. I can't lose this job. I can't. Caleb wanted to tell her everything right then. Who he was, what he could do, how he could protect her. But something held him back. If Lydia and Brent suspected he was more than a trainee, they'd accelerate their plans. Naomi would become collateral damage before he could stop them. Is there anywhere in this store they don't want people to go? He asked quietly. Any area that's off limits? Naomi hesitated, then nodded slowly. The inventory control room. Down the hallway past the management offices. It's always locked. Only Brent and Lydia have access. What's supposed to be in there? Return merchandise awaiting processing. Damaged goods. High-value items that need authorization before being sent back to distribution. She paused. But I've cleaned in there a few times. Late at night, after everyone else leaves. There are computers, boxes that don't match any receiving logs, and sealed envelopes I was specifically told never to touch. They make you clean in there? Not officially. Brent will radio me after closing sometimes. Tell me the room needs immediate attention. I go in, he supervises, I clean quickly, and I leave. He watches me the entire time to make sure I don't look at anything too closely. Her voice shook. Last time, I saw paperwork on the desk. Shipping manifests with numbers that didn't make sense. Items listed as disposed that were sitting right there in boxes. Caleb's mind raced. Return merchandise fraud. Inventory manipulation. It was a classic scheme. Steal high-value returns, report them as destroyed or lost, then resell them through unauthorized channels. The profit disappeared into someone's pocket while the company absorbed the losses. When does he usually call you to clean it? Late evening, after the store closes, when it's just me, Brent, Lydia, and maybe one security guard. How do you get in? Brent unlocks it. I'm never allowed to enter alone. Naomi looked at him with frightened eyes. Why are you asking these questions? What are you planning? I'm not planning anything. I'm just trying to understand what's happening here. Understanding won't protect you, Cameron. It'll just make you a target. She grabbed her cleaning supplies. I have to go. Please be careful. These people are dangerous. She left quickly, and Caleb stood alone in the break room, processing everything. The scheme was becoming clearer: systematic fraud, intimidation, fabricated documentation, and a compliance officer who was clearly part of the conspiracy rather than investigating it. But he still needed concrete evidence. Photos of forged documents weren't enough. He needed the operation caught in action. That evening, Caleb volunteered for the closing shift. Most workers left by 7, but a skeleton crew remained to handle final cleaning and overnight restocking. Naomi was part of that crew, along with 2 night stalkers and a security guard Caleb hadn't met before, a younger man named Tyler who seemed nervous and avoided eye contact. Brent and Lydia were both still in the building. Caleb could see office lights glowing in the management corridor. Around 8:30, while Caleb was supposedly organizing the receiving area, he heard Brent's voice over the radio system. "Naomi, come to inventory control. Immediate cleaning needed." Caleb set down his clipboard and moved quietly through the back corridors. The inventory control room was at the end of a hallway, isolated from the main store areas. As he approached, he could see the door standing open, bright light spilling into the darkened hallway. He positioned himself around a corner where he could hear without being seen. Brent's voice carried clearly. "I don't want excuses, Naomi. I want this room spotless in 15 minutes. And I want you to work faster than you've been working lately." "Yes, sir." Naomi's voice was barely audible. "You've been sloppy, distracted. I'm watching you closely now." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" "Because I'm starting to wonder if you're the right fit for this position. Maybe we made a mistake bringing you here." "Please, Mr. Calloway. I need this job. I'll do better." "We'll see." Caleb risked a glance around the corner. Through the open doorway, he could see into the room. It was larger than he'd expected, maybe 20 by 30 feet. Metal shelving units lined the walls, packed with boxes. A desk sat in one corner with 2 computers, both active with spreadsheets visible on the screens. Filing cabinets stood against the back wall, and on the desk, partially obscured by a stack of folders, was an envelope similar to what Naomi had described, thick, sealed, unmarked. Brent stood in the doorway watching Naomi clean, his posture radiating dominance. Lydia appeared from somewhere inside the room, carrying a tablet. "The next shipment arrives Thursday," she said to Brent, not bothering to lower her voice. "That gives us 3 days to clear the current inventory. The buyers are confirmed and paid. They'll pick up at the usual location. And the documentation? Clean. Every return is officially recorded as damaged beyond resale value, disposed through proper channels." Lydia's tone was businesslike, almost bored. "As far as anyone knows, we're running the most efficient loss prevention operation in the region." Brent chuckled. "Sometimes I almost feel bad. The company writes off thousands in losses while we pocket the profit." "Don't." Lydia's voice went cold. "Wright Retail is a billion-dollar corporation. They can absorb the losses. We're just evening the scales." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. They were talking about his company like it was an acceptable victim, rationalizing theft because the corporation was wealthy enough to survive it. Naomi continued cleaning, her movements quick and nervous. She kept her eyes down, clearly trying to be invisible. "How much longer on the reconciliation?" Brent asked. "Another hour. Then we can lock up." Lydia glanced at Naomi. "She's been in here long enough. Send her home." "Naomi, you're done," Brent said. "Clock out and leave." "Thank you, sir." Naomi gathered her cleaning supplies and hurried out, not looking at either of them. She nearly collided with Caleb as she rounded the corner. Her eyes went wide, terrified, not of him, but at the realization that he'd been close enough to hear. He put a finger to his lips, then gestured for her to follow him. They moved quickly back toward the employee areas, not speaking until they were in the empty break room with the door closed. "You heard," Naomi whispered. "I heard enough." "Oh God. Cameron, you can't tell anyone. If they find out, they're stealing from the company, selling returned merchandise, and cooking the books to hide it." Caleb kept his voice calm. "How long has this been happening?" "I don't know. Since before I got here." Naomi was shaking. "Please tell me you're not going to do something stupid. Please tell me you're not going to report this." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because you'll end up like Jerome. They'll plant evidence, destroy your reputation, and have you arrested before you can open your mouth. She grabbed his arm desperately. I'm serious, Cameron. These people have connections. They have power. You're just a trainee. They'll crush you. Caleb looked at her frightened face. This woman who'd been beaten down and terrified into silence. He made a decision. What if I told you I could protect you? You can't. Nobody can. What if I could? He held her gaze. What if I had resources you don't know about? What if I could guarantee that reporting this wouldn't destroy your life? Naomi searched his face. Who are you? Before Caleb could answer, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from his head of security, someone who had his personal number and wouldn't use it unless something was seriously wrong. Right, we have a situation. Anonymous tip came through about irregularities at Store 001. Board is demanding answers. Call me. Caleb's blood went cold. Store 001 was this location. Someone had tipped off corporate. The investigation he was trying to conduct quietly was about to become public. I have to go, he said. Cameron, trust me, Naomi. This isn't over. He headed for the exit. Behind him, Naomi called out softly, please be careful. They're watching everyone now. Caleb left the building and called his security chief from his car. What happened? Anonymous email to the board. Detailed allegations about Store 001. Theft, fraud, falsified reports, employee intimidation. The board is demanding an immediate formal audit. Who sent it? Untraceable. But whoever it was had access to internal information. Shipping numbers, inventory codes, personnel records. Someone inside the conspiracy had broken ranks. Or someone outside had been watching. When does the audit happen? They're pushing for this week. I've been trying to stall, but several board members are threatening to go public if we don't act fast. His security chief paused. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm Fine. Keep stalling as long as you can. I need more time. Time for what? To finish what I started. Caleb ended the call and sat in the darkness of his car, thinking hard. The anonymous tip changed everything. Brent and Lydia would know something was coming. They'd accelerate whatever endgame they had planned. And Naomi was right in the blast radius. He needed to move faster. The next morning, Caleb arrived early, but the atmosphere in the store had already shifted. Brent was in constant motion, radio in hand, barking orders. Lydia looked tense, her usual composure slightly cracked. Something had spooked them. Caleb kept his head down and worked his assigned tasks, watching and listening. Around noon, he noticed Naomi wasn't at her usual stations. He checked the break room, the restrooms, the supply closets. Empty. He found Sharon restocking shelves. Have you seen Naomi today? Sharon's face tightened. Schedule change. She got moved to overnight shifts. Starting tonight. Why? Management decision. Sharon's voice dropped, and they doubled her workload. She'll be cleaning the entire store alone from midnight to 6 in the morning. Caleb felt ice in his veins. They were isolating her, making her vulnerable. That's not safe. No. Sharon met his eyes. It's not. But if she refuses, they'll fire her for insubordination. Caleb spent the afternoon gathering what information he could. He accessed employee scheduling systems. His fake credentials somehow still worked, and saw the change. Naomi Fletcher, overnight janitorial, solo shift, effective immediately. It was a trap. They were setting her up. That evening, Caleb positioned himself in the parking lot, watching from his car as the day's shift ended and the store emptied. By 11, only a handful of vehicles remained, including Brent's expensive sedan and Lydia's leased Mercedes. At 11:45, Naomi's bus pulled up to the stop across the street. She got off slowly, her cleaning uniform visible under her jacket. She looked exhausted and frightened. Caleb waited until she entered the building, then moved closer. He couldn't go inside. He wasn't scheduled, but he could watch through the windows. The store was dark except for security lighting and the management office glow. Caleb circled to the back of the building, where emergency exits and delivery bays provided different vantage points. Through a high window near receiving, he saw movement. Naomi pushing her cleaning cart, and behind her, at a distance, Brent following. Caleb s'instance crime de danger. He pulled out his phone and activated a recording app. then used the emergency exit code he'd memorized days earlier. The door opened silently. No alarm in this section due to constant loading dock activity. Inside, the store felt different at night. Flushed, empty, echoing. Caleb moved through the shadows, following the sound of wheels and footsteps. Voices drifted from the direction of the inventory control room. I told you to work faster. Brent's voice, harsh and threatening. I'm doing my best, sir. Naomi sounded terrified. Your best isn't good enough. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Please, Mr. Calloway. I need this position. Then prove you deserve it. Caleb reached the corridor and peered around the corner. Naomi stood outside the inventory control room, cleaning cart beside her. Brent loomed over her, intimidating through sheer physical presence. The door to the room was open behind them. There's been a complaint about you, Brent said casually. A customer said you were rude yesterday. Called you by name specifically. I wasn't rude to anyone. I barely interact with customers. Are you calling the customer a liar? No, sir. But I think there's been a mistake. The mistake was hiring you. Brent's voice went cold. You've been nothing but problems since you arrived. Slow work, bad attitude, and now customer complaints. I think it's time we parted ways. You can't fire me. I haven't done anything wrong. I have documentation saying otherwise. Unless, Brent stepped closer. Unless you're willing to show me you can be more cooperative. The implication in his voice made Caleb's vision go red. He started forward, but Naomi spoke first. I'll work harder. I'll take on extra hours. Whatever you need. Just please don't fire me. That's not what I'm talking about. Brent reached out, and Naomi flinched back. Don't touch me. Wrong answer. Brent grabbed her arm, the same arm Caleb had seen bruised before. Naomi cried out in pain. That's when Caleb stepped into the hallway. Let her go. Brent spun around, his expression shifting from aggression to surprise. What the hell are you doing here? You're not scheduled tonight. I said let her go. Brent released Naomi's arm, but didn't back down. You need to leave. Right now. This is a personnel matter. This is assault. It's discipline. And you're trespassing. Brent pulled out his radio. Security, I need you in the back corridor immediately. Call security, Caleb said calmly. Call whoever you want. Because while you're at it, I'll be calling the police. For what? Teaching an employee about workplace standards. For theft, fraud, falsified documentation, and about a dozen other crimes I have evidence of. The corridor went silent. Brent's face changed, calculation replacing aggression. You're bluffing. I have photos of forged disciplinary reports. I have recordings of you and Lydia discussing merchandise resale operations. I have witness testimony about planted evidence and intimidation. Caleb pulled out his phone, holding it up, and I've been recording this entire conversation. Naomi stared at him in shock. Cameron, my name isn't Cameron. He kept his eyes on Brent. And you should probably know, this company doesn't belong to you. Brent's face went pale. Who are you? Caleb Wright, CEO and founder. And you're fired. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Brent lunged forward, reaching for Caleb's phone. Caleb sidestepped easily and hit the emergency call button. Alarms shrieked through the building. Within seconds, footsteps pounded toward them. Tyler, the security guard, running with his hand on his radio. Mr. Calloway, what's... Tyler stopped dead when he saw the scene. Call the police, Caleb ordered. This man just assaulted an employee. Don't listen to him. Brent shouted. He's trespassing. Tyler looked between them, confused and frightened. Then his gaze landed on Naomi, standing against the wall holding her arm, tears streaming down her face. Call the police, Tyler said quietly into his radio. We have a situation. Lydia appeared at the end of the hallway, pulled from her office by the alarms. She took in the scene, Caleb, Brent, Naomi, Tyler, and her expression went carefully blank. What's going on? Ask your partner in crime, Caleb said. Or better yet, ask yourself how you're going to explain the unauthorized merchandise operation you've been running out of the inventory control room. Lydia's mask cracked. I don't know what you're talking about. Then you won't mind if I take a look inside. Caleb moved toward the open door. You can't go in there. Brent stepped into his path. That's restricted access. It's my building. My company. My inventory room. Caleb's voice went hard. Move. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Brent's composure finally shattered. He turned and ran, not toward the exits, but deeper into the store, toward the back loading area. Tyler started after him, but Caleb grabbed his arm. Let him go. The police will catch him. Right now, I need you to secure this door. Nobody goes in or out. Tyler nodded and positioned himself at the inventory control room entrance. Lydia tried to walk away calmly, but her hands shook as she reached for her briefcase. I need to make a call. You need to stay right here, Caleb said. The police will want to speak with you. I'm a corporate compliance officer. I have authority. You had authority. Past tense. Caleb looked at her directly. How much were you making on the side? 50,000? 100? Was it worth destroying people's lives? Lydia said nothing, but her face had gone white. The police arrived minutes later. 3 cars, lights flashing. Officers flooded the building, securing exits and rounding up the few remaining employees. Caleb showed his identification, explained who he was, and provided a brief overview of the situation. Detective Sarah Pierce took his statement, her expression growing darker with each detail. You're telling me this has been going on for months? Maybe years. At least 2 years at this location. Possibly longer. And I suspect it extends to other stores in the region. We'll need access to your records. Financial documents, employee files, security footage. You'll have everything. Caleb gestured toward the inventory control room. Start in there. While police processed the scene, Caleb turned to find Naomi. She was sitting on the floor against the wall, arms wrapped around herself, shaking uncontrollably. He knelt beside her. Naomi. She looked up at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. You're really the CEO? I really am. You've been here the whole time. Watching. Listening. I had to see it for myself. Corporate investigations missed everything. I needed to understand how this was happening. And now, her voice cracked. What happens now? Now the truth comes out. Brent and Lydia will be arrested. The operation will be exposed. And everyone they hurt will get justice. Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. I'm going to lose my job. No. Caleb's voice was firm. You're going to keep your job. You did nothing wrong. You were trapped and terrorized. That ends tonight. But the store, everything. The store will be fine. The company will be fine. And you. He paused, making sure she was listening. You're going to be fine. Naomi buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Not from fear this time, but from relief. Across the corridor, officers escorted Lydia toward the exit in handcuffs. She stared straight ahead, refusing to look at anyone. Brent had been caught trying to escape through a loading dock and was being processed in a patrol car. Detective Pierce approached Caleb. We found the computers. Looks like detailed records of unauthorized sales going back 18 months. Spreadsheet, billet contact, paiement transfert. They documented everything. Criminals usually do. They think they're untouchable. They also think they're smart. Pierce glanced at Naomi. She's going to need to give a statement. But maybe let her recover first. This has been traumatic. Take whatever time she needs. Pierce nodded and moved away to coordinate with her team. Caleb sat down next to Naomi on the floor, both of them leaning against the wall in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Police radios crackled. Officers moved through the building, documenting evidence. The store that had been a prison was now a crime scene. I thought you were just a nice trainee, Naomi said quietly. Someone who actually cared. I am someone who cares. The trainee part was just cover. Why didn't you tell me? Because if Brent and Lydia suspected who I was, they would have destroyed evidence and disappeared. You would have been blamed. Other employees would have been silenced. I needed them to believe they were safe. Naomi was quiet for a moment. What happens to my brother? Marcus? He's been staying with a neighbor while I work nights. If I can't. Naomi. Caleb turned to look at her directly. You're not losing anything. Your job is secure. Your paycheck is secure. Your brother is secure. Whatever Brent and Lydia threatened you with, none of it was real. They had no power. They were just criminals using fear as a weapon. It felt real. I know. That's what makes people like them dangerous. He paused. But they're done now, and you're free. Naomi closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her face. I've been so scared for so long. I know. I'm sorry it took this long to stop them. They sat together in silence as the chaos of the investigation continued around them. Eventually, Detective Pierce returned and gently asked Naomi if she felt ready to answer some questions. Naomi nodded, wiped her face, and followed the detective to a quiet area. Caleb stood alone in the corridor, looking at the inventory control room where officers were photographing evidence. The locked door that had represented so much secrecy and fear now stood wide open, its contents exposed to daylight. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. News is breaking. Board is an emergency session. What do you want me to tell them? Caleb typed back. Tell them I found what I was looking for. Tell them it's worse than we thought. And tell them to prepare for a full internal audit of every location in the region. The response came immediately. Understood. Are you safe? I'm Fina. The threat is contained. He pocketed his phone and looked down the hallway, where Naomi sat with Detective Pierce, speaking quietly but steadily. She was finally telling her story, finally being heard. Across the store, through the windows, dawn was beginning to break. The night was ending, but Caleb knew this was just the beginning. The arrest of Brent and Lydia would trigger investigations, lawsuits, media attention, and corporate upheaval. The comfortable narrative of Right Retail as a family company would be shattered. Uncomfortable truths would emerge. And somewhere out there, other employees at other stores were watching and wondering if they, too, could finally speak up. Caleb walked toward the front of the store, watching sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. His reflection stared back at him in the glass doors. A man in jeans and a hoodie who'd spent days invisible in his own company. He'd found what he was looking for. The truth behind the anonymous reports. The systematic corruption hidden beneath corporate efficiency. But he'd also found something he hadn't expected. In the frightened face of a janitor crying in a closet, he'd rediscovered the reason he'd built this company in the first place. To create a place where people could work with dignity, without fear, without having to choose between survival and integrity. He'd lost sight of that somewhere along the way. But now, watching the sun rise through the glass doors of Store 001, he remembered, and he wasn't going to forget again. Behind him, Naomi's voice carried through the quiet store. His name was Caleb Wright, and he saved my life. Caleb closed his eyes, feeling the weight of those words. No, he thought, you saved yourself. I just made sure people would finally listen. The morning shift would arrive in an hour. The store would open. Life would continue. But nothing would ever be the same again. The story broke at sunrise. By the time Caleb left the store at 7 in the morning, news vans were already pulling into the parking lot. Reporters with cameras and microphones crowded the entrance, shouting questions at anyone who emerged from the building. Is it true the CEO went undercover? How long has this been happening? Were employees being held against their will? Detective Pierce had stationed officers at the doors to keep the media back, but nothing could stop the story from spreading. Within an hour, it was trending on social media. Within 2 hours, it was national news. The headlines were brutal and immediate. Billion-dollar retail CEO exposes corruption in his own company. Right Retail store manager arrested for fraud and employee intimidation. Undercover boss reality. CEO discovers systematic abuse. Caleb sat in his actual car now, the luxury sedan he'd retrieved from storage, watching the news coverage on his phone. His board of directors had been calling nonstop since 6 in the morning. His inbox overflowed with messages from shareholders, executives, lawyers, and media outlets demanding statements. But he turned off his phone after sending one message to his communications director: full transparency. No espin. We tell the truth. Now he sat outside a small apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, waiting. The address belonged to Naomi Fletcher. After giving her statement to police, she'd been released with instructions to rest and return for follow-up interviews. Caleb had offered to have a driver take her home, but she'd refused, taking the bus like always. He needed to check on her, not as CEO, but as the person who'd witnessed her suffering and promised it would end. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a worn brick building. Caleb climbed the stairs and knocked gently on door 3C. For a long moment, There was no response. Then he heard movement inside, cautious footsteps, the sound of a chain being tested. The door opened a crack, and Naomi's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She still wore her work uniform. "Mr. Wright." Her voice was hoarse. "Please call me Caleb. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then opened the door wider. The apartment was small but clean, a combination living room and kitchen, with 2 bedroom doors visible down a short hallway. Discount furniture, second-hand but well-maintained. Photos on the wall showed Naomi with a younger teenage boy, both of them smiling. Her brother Marcus. "I'm sorry for just showing up," Caleb said. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Naomi closed the door and leaned against it, her arms wrapped around herself. "I don't know what I am. That's understandable. You've been through something traumatic. Have you seen the news?" She gestured toward a laptop open on the coffee table, news articles filling the screen. "They're calling me the janitor who exposed a criminal conspiracy. They're acting like I'm some kind of hero." Her voice cracked. "I'm not a hero. I was just trying to survive." Survival in that situation required extraordinary courage. It required fear. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Every single day I was terrified. Terrified of losing my job. Terrified of what they'd do to me. Terrified of what would happen to Marcus if I couldn't pay rent." She wiped her face roughly. "That's not courage. That's just being trapped." Caleb chose his words carefully. "You were trapped, but you didn't break. You kept going. And when I asked questions, you warned me about the danger, even though helping me put you at greater risk. That's courage, Naomi." She shook her head. "I didn't do anything. You did everything. I had power and resources. You had nothing but determination to protect your brother. We both did what we could with what we had." He paused. "Where's Marcus now?" "Still at my neighbor's apartment. I haven't told him what happened yet. He knows I worked overnight, but he doesn't know about everything else." Naomi's voice dropped. "How do I explain this to a 16-year-old? How do I tell him his sister was being abused at work for months and couldn't do anything about it? You tell him the truth, that you did everything you could in an impossible situation, and that it's over now. Is it over?" Naomi met his eyes directly. "Because there are reporters outside this building. My phone won't stop ringing. Everyone wants to interview the brave janitor who stood up to corruption. But I didn't stand up to anything. I hid in closets and cried. And that image, you crying in that closet, is what started this entire investigation." Caleb moved closer, but maintained a respectful distance. "Naomi, I built Right Retail on the principle that every employee deserves dignity. For months, maybe years, my company failed you. Management failed you. Corporate oversight failed you. I failed you. You didn't even know. I should have known. That's my responsibility as the person running this company." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the coffee table. "This is the first step toward making it right." Naomi stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "What is that?" "Compensation. Back pay for the overtime you were never credited for. Hazard pay for the unsafe working conditions. And a formal settlement offer that includes medical coverage for therapy and any other support you need. I don't want your money. It's not charity. It's what you're owed." Caleb's voice was firm but gentle. "Brent and Lydia stole from you your time, your dignity, your peace of mind. This is restitution." Naomi finally picked up the envelope with shaking hands. She opened it and pulled out the paperwork inside. Her eyes scanned the numbers, and her face went pale. This is 6 months of my salary. It's what we estimate you're owed, plus compensation for emotional distress. And it's separate from the class action settlement that's being prepared for all affected employees." Class action. "We've identified at least 40 employees across 5 stores who experienced similar treatment. Some are fired on false pretenses. Some resigned under duress. Some are still working in fear, just like you were." Caleb sat down carefully on the edge of the couch. "We're reaching out to all of them, offering settlements, counseling, and the opportunity to tell their stories if they choose to." Naomi set the papers down, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do. Because these people work for my company and suffered because I didn't see what was happening soon enough." He paused. And because someone very brave once asked me to stop asking questions, and I realized that silence was exactly what allowed this to happen. Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. I don't know what to do. Everyone's calling me. Reporters want interviews. Lawyers want statements. I just want to sleep for a week and pretend this never happened. Then do that. Sleep. Ignore the calls. Take care of yourself. Caleb stood. The legal proceedings will take months. You don't have to face any of it alone or unprepared. I'm assigning you a personal advocate, someone who will help you navigate everything, answer your questions, and protect your interests. I can't afford a lawyer. You're not paying for one. The company is. Consider it part of the settlement. Naomi looked at him with exhausted, grateful eyes. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. Because I saw you crying in a closet, terrified and alone. And I realized that every corporate value statement I'd ever written meant nothing if my own employees felt that way. Caleb moved toward the door, then paused. You don't have to be a hero, Naomi. You don't have to give interviews or make statements. You just have to heal. Everything else is optional. What about work? Do I still have a job? You have a job for as long as you want one. And when you're ready to return, if you're ready to return, it won't be to that store. We're shutting down Store 001 for a complete restructuring. Every employee is being reassigned or offered severance packages. Naomi's breath caught. You're closing the store? Temporarily, until we can ensure it's a safe workplace. Until we can rebuild trust. He opened the door. Rest, Naomi. Someone will contact you tomorrow about the advocacy services. Until then, focus on your brother and yourself. He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Outside, the morning sun was climbing higher, and the city was waking up to the biggest corporate scandal in recent memory. Caleb's phone was still off, but he knew what awaited him. Emergency board meetings, shareholder lawsuits, federal investigations, and the complete dismantling of his company's public image. But for the first time in months, he felt like he was doing the right thing. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing began. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, former employees, corporate lawyers, and curious spectators filled every available seat. Brent Calloway and Lydia Cross sat at the defense table with their attorneys, both of them wearing expensive suits and carefully neutral expressions. They'd been released on bail after their arrests, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. Caleb sat in the gallery, watching as the prosecution laid out their case. Financial records showing unauthorized merchandise sales totaling over $800,000. Falsified inventory reports. Forged disciplinary documents. Testimony from employees describing intimidation, harassment, and systematic abuse. The defense attorneys argued that Brent and Lydia were being scapegoated for corporate-wide failures, that they'd operated within the parameters given to them by upper management, that the company was using them as convenient villains to avoid taking responsibility for systemic problems. There was some truth to that argument, which made it more dangerous. But the prosecution had something the defense couldn't refute: recordings. Caleb's recording of Brent and Lydia discussing the fraud operation. Audio of Brent threatening Naomi. Documentation of the planted evidence against Jerome Williams. On the 4th day of the hearing, Naomi was called to testify. Caleb watched as she walked to the witness stand, wearing a simple navy dress and looking terrified. Her hands shook as she was sworn in. Her voice was barely audible when she confirmed her name and employment history. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Chun, approached gently. Ms. Fletcher, can you describe your experience working at Right Retail Store 001? Naomi's voice trembled. It was difficult. Can you be more specific? I was afraid all the time. Naomi's words came slowly, carefully. Afraid of making mistakes. Afraid of saying the wrong thing. Afraid of losing my job. Why were you afraid of losing your job? Because I have a younger brother, Marcus. I'm his guardian. If I lost my income, I couldn't support him. He'd go into the foster system. Did the defendants know about your situation? Yes. Mr. Calloway asked me about it during my first week. He seemed sympathetic at the time. Naomi's voice hardened slightly. Later, he used it against me. How did he use it against you? Whenever I questioned something or seemed hesitant about a task, he'd mention my brother. He'd say things like, "I hope Marcus is doing well in school," or "It would be terrible if you couldn't provide for him." It was a reminder that he could take everything away. Did Ms. Cross participate in this intimidation? She was more subtle. She'd pull me aside and warn me that I was on thin ice or that my performance was concerning. She once told me that some employees couldn't handle the responsibilities of their positions and that the company had to make difficult decisions. The prosecutor pulled up documents on a screen. "Ms. Fletcher, are you familiar with this disciplinary report?" Naomi studied it. "Yes, that's on the fake violations they created. It says I left work early on a Thursday in September. I didn't. I worked my full shift." "How do you know?" "Because I remember that day specifically. My brother had a school event that evening. I asked Mr. Calloway if I could leave 30 minutes early. He refused. I worked until 8, missed the event, and Marcus was upset with me for days." Her voice broke. "I sacrificed time with my brother to keep that job, and they still falsified records claiming I'd abandoned my shift." The defense attorney objected, claiming speculation. The judge allowed the testimony to stand given the physical evidence of time card manipulation. Linda Chun continued, "Ms. Fletcher, the night of November 14th, can you describe what happened?" This was the hardest part. Naomi took a shaky breath. "I was working the overnight shift. Alone. Mr. Calloway was still in the building. He called me to the inventory control room and told me to clean it." She paused, gathering courage. "While I was working, he told me there had been a customer complaint about me, that I was going to be fired unless I proved I could be more cooperative." "What did you understand that to mean?" "That he wanted something from me that had nothing to do with work." Naomi's voice was steady now, anger replacing fear. "He grabbed my arm. The same arm he'd grabbed before, so he knew it would hurt. I told him not to touch me. He said I'd given him the wrong answer." The courtroom was silent. What happened next? Mr. Wright appeared. He ordered Mr. Calloway to let me go. He revealed who he really was, and he called the police. Before Mr. Wright revealed his identity, did you know who he was? "No, I thought he was a trainee named Cameron Walker. He'd been kind to me. He asked questions and seemed to care. But I didn't know he was the CEO until that night." The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. He was older, gray-haired, with a practiced, sympathetic expression. "Ms. Fletcher, you mentioned being afraid. But you never filed a formal complaint with HR, did you?" "No." "You never reported Mr. Calloway's behavior to corporate?" "No." "You never sought help from any supervisors or managers?" "No." "Why not?" Naomi's voice went quiet. "Because I'd done that in my previous store. I reported harassment. Corporate investigated. They said there wasn't enough evidence. They transferred me to store 001 and told me it was a fresh start." She looked at the defense attorney directly. "Within a month of arriving, the harassment started again. I learned that reporting problems doesn't solve them. It just makes you a target. But isn't it possible you misinterpreted Mr. Calloway's actions? That what you perceived as threats were simply firm management? He grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises. Multiple times. He threatened my job unless I cooperated with his demands. He falsified records to justify firing me." Naomi's voice rose slightly. "That's not firm management. That's abuse. You mentioned recordings. Did you make these recordings?" "No." "Mr. Wright made them. So you have no independent evidence of these alleged threats?" The prosecutor objected. "Your Honor, we have photographic evidence of injuries, testimony from multiple employees describing similar treatment, and financial records proving fraud. The defense is badgering the witness." The judge sustained the objection. The defense attorney sat down, looking frustrated. After Naomi's testimony, other employees took the stand. David, the exhausted stock clerk, described being forced to work unpaid overtime under threat of termination. Sharon testified about witnessing employees being fired on false accusations. Marcus, the teenage cashier, explained how Brent had threatened to report him to truancy officers if he didn't work extra shifts. Each testimony painted the same picture: a workplace ruled by fear, where vulnerable employees were exploited and silenced. On the final day of the preliminary hearing, Caleb himself took the stand. The prosecutor asked him to explain why he'd gone undercover rather than conducting a traditional investigation. "I'd received anonymous reports for months," Caleb explained. "Every time I sent corporate investigators, they found nothing. Clean audits, satisfied employees, perfect records. I realized the system was being gamed. So I removed myself from the system entirely." "What did you discover?" "That my company was being used as a criminal enterprise. That managers were running fraud operations under the cover of legitimate business. And that employees were being trapped through economic necessity and intimidation." He paused. "I also discovered that corporate oversight had completely failed. The safeguards I'd put in place weren't working. Fear had created silence, and silence had allowed abuse to flourish." "Do you believe you're responsible for what happened at Store 001? "Yes." Caleb's voice was firm. "I'm responsible for every employee who works for Right Retail. When they suffer, that's my failure. When systems I created are used to hurt people, that's my failure. I can't undo what happened, but I can ensure it never happens again." The defense tried to paint Caleb's undercover operation as entrapment or as an invasion of employee privacy. But the evidence was too strong. Financial records, recordings, testimony from dozens of employees. The case against Brent and Lydia was overwhelming. The judge scheduled the trial for 6 months later and denied the defense's request to dismiss the charges. Outside the courthouse, Naomi stood on the steps, surrounded by reporters. Caleb had offered to shield her from the media, but she'd chosen to make a statement. "For months, I was too afraid to speak," she said quietly, cameras recording every word. "I was afraid of losing my job, afraid of not being able to care for my brother, afraid that no one would believe me." She paused, gathering strength. "But I'm not afraid anymore, because I've learned that silence protects abusers and punishes victims. And I refuse to be silent." Reporters shouted questions, but Naomi simply turned and walked away, her head held high. Caleb watched from a distance, feeling something shift in his chest. She'd been crying in a closet just weeks ago, too terrified to even speak. Now she was standing in front of cameras, telling her truth to the world. That was the real victory. Not the arrests or the legal proceedings, but the fact that Naomi Fletcher had found her voice again. As Caleb left the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a message from his head of security. 37 additional employees have come forward with complaints. Legal is preparing settlements. 37 more stories. 37 more people who'd been suffering in silence. Caleb typed back, "Schedule meetings with each of them personally. I want to hear every story, and I want to know exactly how he failed them." The response came quickly. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." Caleb looked back at the courthouse, where Naomi had just spoken her truth to the world. "I know," he typed, "but we're finally doing the right thing. That's what matters." He put his phone away and walked toward his car, knowing that the hardest work was still ahead. The trial would be brutal. The media attention would be unrelenting. His company's reputation would take years to rebuild. But somewhere in that courthouse, Naomi Fletcher had reclaimed her dignity. And that made everything else worth it. The journey from victim to survivor had begun, and Caleb would make sure she didn't walk it alone. 6 months passed like a storm, intense, exhausting, and transformative. The trial of Brent Calloway and Lydia Cross became a national spectacle. Every major news outlet covered the proceedings. Legal analysts debated corporate responsibility on cable news. Social media exploded with hashtags about workplace abuse and employee rights. Right Retail stock initially plummeted, then stabilized as Caleb's transparency and accountability measures became public. But none of the external noise mattered as much as what happened inside that courtroom. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Financial forensics revealed that Brent and Lydia had orchestrated the fraud operation for nearly 3 years, stealing over $800,000 through unauthorized resale of returned merchandise. They created an entire shadow accounting system, complete with fake vendors, forged signatures, and falsified loss reports. More damning were the personal testimonies. 43 employees, not 37, as initially reported, came forward with stories of intimidation, harassment, fabricated violations, and systematic abuse. Each story followed the same pattern. Vulnerable workers trapped by economic necessity, exploited by managers who wielded job security like a weapon. Jerome Williams, the man who'd been fired on planted theft charges, testified via video from across the country. He'd moved his family to another state after the incident, too traumatized to remain. His voice shook as he described being arrested in front of his children, spending a night in jail, and losing everything because security cameras had conveniently malfunctioned during the time merchandise was supposedly stolen. "They destroyed my reputation," Jerome said quietly. "I couldn't get another job for 8 months. My kids asked me if I was a criminal. My wife had to work 3 jobs while I fought to clear my name." He looked directly at the defense table. "All because I asked why my overtime wasn't being paid." The defense argued entrapment, corporate negligence, and insufficient oversight. They painted Brent and Lydia as middle managers caught in an impossible system, pressured to meet unrealistic targets by executives who didn't care how results were achieved. But the recordings destroyed that narrative. Caleb's audio captured Brent and Lydia laughing about their operation, discussing profit splits, and planning intimidation tactics. There was no ambiguity, no gray area. They'd known exactly what they were doing, and they'd enjoyed it. On the trial's 8th day, Naomi took the stand again, this time for the full trial, not just the preliminary hearing. She looked different now, stronger. Her voice didn't shake when she was sworn in. She wore a professional blazer Caleb had helped her purchase for the occasion, and her natural hair was styled confidently. 6 months of therapy had given her tools to process the trauma, and the support system Caleb had provided, legal advocates, counselors, and a community of fellow survivors, had shown her she wasn't alone. The prosecutor asked her to recount her experience, and Naomi spoke clearly and calmly. She described the fear, the intimidation, the bruises, the fake violations, and the night Brent had grabbed her arm and demanded she cooperate. When a defense attorney tried to rattle her during cross-examination, suggesting she'd been oversensitive or had misinterpreted firm management, Naomi didn't flinch. "I know the difference between firm management and abuse," she said steadily. "Firm management involves clear expectations, constructive feedback, and opportunities to improve. What I experienced was harassment, intimidation, and assault. Those aren't management techniques. They're crimes." The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney pressed harder. "But you benefited from this situation, didn't you? You received a substantial settlement from Right Retail. You've been featured in national media. Some might say you had motivation to exaggerate." "Objection." The prosecutor was on her feet. "Counsel is implying the witness is lying for financial gain. That's defamatory and irrelevant." Sustained. The judge looked at the defense attorney sternly. "Rephrase or move on." But Naomi spoke before he could continue. "I would give every penny back if it meant I could have those 6 months of my life returned. If it meant I could sleep without nightmares. If it meant my brother didn't have to watch his sister cry herself to sleep because she was too afraid to quit a job that was destroying her." Her voice was strong, unwavering. "I'm not here for money or attention. I'm here because what happened to me was wrong, and it's still happening to people in workplaces across this country. If my testimony helps stop even one person from experiencing what I did, then every painful moment of this trial is worth it." The jury watched her intently. Several jurors had tears in their eyes. When Naomi stepped down, Caleb met her outside the courtroom. She'd asked her brother Marcus to come to court that day, the first time the 16-year-old would see his sister testify. Marcus was tall for his age, with the same dark eyes as Naomi and an expression that mixed protectiveness with pride. "You were amazing," Marcus said, hugging his sister tightly. "I was terrified," Naomi admitted. "Didn't show." Marcus pulled back and looked at Caleb. "Thank you for helping her, for believing her. Your sister saved herself," Caleb said. "I just made sure people listened." The trial continued for another week. Expert witnesses testified about workplace abuse patterns. Financial analysts explained the fraud scheme. Former employees described the culture of fear. The evidence was overwhelming. On a gray Thursday afternoon, the jury returned after only 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Brent Calloway and Lydia Cross were convicted of fraud, theft, conspiracy, falsifying business records, and multiple counts of assault and harassment. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. When the verdicts were read, Brent stared straight ahead, his face blank. Lydia closed her eyes and lowered her head. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps and whispered conversations. Naomi sat in the gallery, Marcus beside her, and simply breathed. It was over. The truth had been heard. Justice had been served. Outside, reporters swarmed. But Naomi didn't speak to them this time. She'd said everything she needed to say on the stand. Instead, she walked to a quiet park 2 blocks away, where Caleb had arranged for a car to pick her and Marcus up away from the cameras. "How do you feel?" Caleb asked as they waited. Naomi considered the question carefully. "Lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." She looked at him, but also sad, because this shouldn't have happened. Not to me. Not to Jerome. Not to any of us. No, it shouldn't have. Will it happen again? At other companies? Probably. Caleb's honesty was gentle but real. There will always be people who abuse power. But now there are 43 voices saying it's not acceptable. 43 people who refuse to stay silent. That matters. Marcus spoke up quietly. "My sister's a hero." "I'm not a hero," Naomi said automatically. "Yeah, you are." Marcus looked at her seriously. "You were scared, and you did it anyway. That's what heroes do." Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from my big sister." Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Brent Calloway received 8 years in federal prison. Lydia Cross received 6 years. Both were ordered to pay full restitution, every dollar they'd stolen, plus penalties. Civil lawsuits from the 43 employees would continue separately, but the criminal justice had concluded. The day after sentencing, Caleb called Naomi and asked her to meet him at Store 001. She hadn't been back since that terrible November night 6 months ago. The store had been closed for renovations, not just physical updates, but a complete cultural restructuring. New management had been hired. Anonymous reporting systems had been installed. Employee advocates now had offices on site. Every single policy had been reviewed and rewritten with input from workers. When Naomi arrived, she found Caleb standing outside the entrance. The store looked different in daylight, less threatening somehow. The same building, but transformed by intention and accountability. "Why did you ask me to come here?" Naomi asked. "Because I have a question for you." Caleb gestured toward the building. 6 months ago, I offered you an education path and a position in internal compliance. You said you'd think about it. I'm asking again." Naomi looked at the store, then back at him. "I'm just a janitor, Caleb. I don't have a degree. I don't have corporate experience. You have something more valuable. You understand what it feels like to be powerless in a workplace. You can recognize fear before people even speak it. You know exactly what broken systems look like from the inside." He paused. "I'm not offering you a job because I feel guilty or because it makes good PR. I'm offering it because you're the most qualified person I know to help rebuild this company's culture. What would I actually do? Listen to employees. Visit stores. Identify problems before they become crises. You'd work with our ethics team, report directly to me, and have authority to investigate any workplace concerns." Caleb met her eyes directly. "You'd be the person you needed 6 months ago, the one who actually had power to change things." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, processing. "I need training. We provide it. Business courses, conflict resolution, labor law, whatever you need. You'd have a mentor and full support." "What about Marcus?" "He's still in school. I can't travel constantly. You'd be based here locally, visiting regional stores once a month. And the salary would let you afford better childcare when needed." Caleb pulled out a folder. "This is the formal offer. Take your time. Read it. Discuss it with Marcus. No pressure." Naomi took the folder, but didn't open it. Instead, she looked at the store entrance. "Can we go inside?" "Of course." They walked through the doors together. The interior was bright and clean, just as it had always been, but subtle changes were everywhere. Employee suggestion boxes had been replaced with private reporting tablets. Break rooms had been expanded with comfortable furniture. Lockers had been reinforced with better locks. and prominently displayed near the entrance was a framed statement. Right Retail commits to treating every employee with dignity, respect, and fairness. If you experience harassment, intimidation, or unsafe working conditions, you have the right to report it without fear of retaliation. Your voice matters. Your safety matters. You matter. Caleb's signature sat at the bottom. Naomi walked slowly through the store, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She paused near the janitorial supply area where she'd once cried behind a door. She looked down the hallway toward where the inventory control room had been, now converted into an employee wellness center with counseling resources and private meeting spaces. "The locked door is gone," she said quietly. "No more locked doors. No more secrets." Caleb stood a respectful distance away. "Transparency is the only way forward." Naomi turned to face him. "If I take this job, I'm not going to be quiet about problems. I won't sugarcoat things or protect management if they're wrong. That's exactly why I want you. I'm going to push back. I'm going to challenge policies. I'm going to be the voice of workers, not corporate." "Good. That's your job." Naomi looked down at the folder in her hands, then back at Caleb. "I need to talk to Marcus first." "But—" She paused, and a small smile appeared. "I think my answer is yes. Take your time. There's no rush. When would I start? Whenever you're ready. Next week. Next month. It's your choice." Naomi nodded slowly, emotions swirling across her face. "6 months ago, I was crying in a closet because I thought I'd never escape this place. Now I'm standing here considering a job that would help other people escape similar situations." She laughed softly, disbelievingly. "My life has completely changed." "You changed it," Caleb said gently. "You chose to survive. You chose to speak. You chose to reclaim your power. I just clear the obstacles." They walked together back toward the entrance. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors, illuminating the space that had once felt like a prison and now felt like possibility. At the door, Naomi paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That first day, when you found me crying, did you know then what you were going to do?" Caleb thought back to that moment. The muffled crying, the woman with red eyes and shaking hands, the fear in her voice when she'd apologized for existing. "I knew something was very wrong, and I knew I couldn't leave until I understood what it was." He met her eyes. "But I didn't know I'd find someone as brave as you." That changed everything. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but they were different tears now. Not despair, but recognition. "Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for not giving up." They stood together in the doorway, the store empty and quiet behind them. Outside, life continued. Cars in the parking lot, people walking past, the ordinary flow of an ordinary day. But nothing about this moment felt ordinary. "I'll talk to Marcus tonight," Naomi said, "and I'll call you tomorrow with my answer. I'll be waiting." Naomi walked to her car, not a bus this time, but a used sedan she'd purchased with part of her settlement. Marcus was waiting in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone. When he saw his sister, he looked up and smiled. Caleb watched them drive away, then turned back to look at Store 001, the flagship location that had started his empire, the place where everything had gone so wrong. And now, hopefully, the place where things would begin to go right. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of communications. "Documentary crew wants final interview. They're calling it The Janitor and the CEO, a story of courage and accountability. Filming next week. You in?" Caleb typed back. "Only if Naomi agrees to participate. Her story, her choice." The response came quickly. She already said yes. She wants to help other people recognize workplace abuse. Caleb smiled and pocketed his phone. 3 months later, Naomi Fletcher walked through the doors of Store 001, wearing a professional blazer, carrying a tablet, and wearing an official Right Retail badge that identified her as employee advocate and compliance specialist. It was her first day in her new role. Marcus had been thrilled when she'd accepted the position, proud of his sister for turning trauma into purpose. The training had been intensive, 8 weeks of courses, workshops, and mentorship. Naomi had absorbed everything, driven by the memory of what she'd survived and the determination to prevent others from experiencing the same. Now she stood in the store that had once been her nightmare, preparing to inspect it through entirely new eyes. The manager, a woman named Patricia Richardson, carefully vetted and trained in the new protocols, greeted her warmly. "Ms. Fletcher, welcome. We're ready for your inspection. Please call me Naomi." She pulled up her checklist. "Let's start with the break rooms. I want to talk to employees privately, understand how they're really feeling." "Of course. Whatever you need." They walked through the store together, and Naomi felt something shift inside her. She passed the supply corridor where she'd once hidden and cried. But she didn't stop walking, didn't look away. The space no longer held power over her. She was here by choice now, not as a victim, but as someone with authority to create change. Throughout the day, Naomi spoke with employees, cashiers, stockers, cleaners, and supervisors. She asked about their experiences, their concerns, their hopes. Some were guarded at first and used to management actually listening. But Naomi's genuine empathy and her own story, which had been widely publicized through the trial and documentary, created trust. "I was where you are," she told a nervous young woman working returns. "I understand being afraid to speak up. That's exactly why I'm here, to make sure you don't have to be afraid." By the end of her first week, Naomi had identified 3 areas needing improvement, discovered 2 employees experiencing harassment from customers who'd learned their management wasn't intervening, and recommended policy changes that would be implemented within days. She was good at this work. More than good, she was exceptional, because she understood it from the inside, because she carried the weight of what silence had cost her and 42 others. One evening, as Naomi was leaving the store after a long day, she found Caleb waiting in the parking lot. "Surprise inspection?" she asked, smiling. "Checking in on my newest hire. How's it going?" "It's hard. Every time I talk to someone who's scared, I see myself 6 months ago. Every time someone tells me about a manager who makes them uncomfortable, I feel that same trapped feeling." She paused. "But then I remember I have power now. I can actually help. And that makes it worth it. You're doing incredible work." The feedback from employees has been overwhelmingly positive. "Good." Naomi looked back at the store. "I'm going to make sure no one ever cries in a closet here again, or anywhere in this company." "I believe you." They stood together in the quiet parking lot as evening descended. The documentary about their story would air in 2 weeks. The trial verdicts had brought national attention to workplace abuse. Changes were rippling through the retail industry as other companies scrambled to avoid similar scandals. But the real change was standing right here. A woman who'd survived, spoken up, and transformed her trauma into purpose. "Can I tell you something?" Naomi said quietly. "Always. 6 months ago, I wished I could disappear. I felt worthless, powerless, invisible." She turned to look at Caleb. "Now I feel like I finally matter. Like my voice actually means something." "Your voice always mattered, Naomi. The world just wasn't listening yet." "Well, they're listening now." As Naomi drove home to Marcus, who'd already texted asking what she wanted for dinner, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The face looking back at her was different from the one that had cried in closets and apologized for existing. This face was strong, determined, free. She thought about Brent and Lydia, sitting in prison cells, their crimes exposed and punished. She thought about the 42 other employees who'd found their voices alongside hers. She thought about Jerome Williams, who'd called her last week to say he'd found a new job and his kids no longer asked if he was a criminal. Justice hadn't fixed everything. Naomi still had nightmares sometimes. She still flinched when someone raised their voice. Trauma didn't disappear just because the perpetrators had been punished. But healing was happening. Day by day, conversation by conversation, she was reclaiming the parts of herself that fear had stolen. And now she was helping others do the same. The next morning, Naomi returned to Store 001 for another day of inspections. She walked through the entrance with her head high, her badge visible, her purpose clear. She passed the supply corridor without stopping. The closet door stood open now, just another storage space, stripped of its power to contain secrets or hide tears. Naomi looked at it once, acknowledged what it had represented, and kept walking. She had work to do, people to help, a future to build, and this time, she was doing it on her own terms. The woman who'd once been invisible was now the person making sure everyone else was seen. And that was justice, not just in verdicts and sentences, but in transformation and purpose. Naomi Fletcher had survived, and now she was teaching others how to do the same. If you discovered that surviving your job required more courage than most people show in a lifetime, what would that say about the place you work? Like and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay silent.